I'm suicidal. I'm thinking about killing myself. I don't know what to do. My husband just left me for another woman. So many teenagers saying, I hate my life. So many people asking me, how can I love myself more? I didn't have an answer. I legitimately didn't know what to tell these people. And I felt as if I was a massive fraud. And so part 2 of You Are Who You've Been Looking For Behind the Poetry begins with me now having a viral sensation on the internet. I have a piece of poetry that hundreds of millions of people have seen. I am getting messages every single day, hundreds of messages. In those first few days, it was hundreds of messages from people. And the most common message that I was getting was thank you. People saying how beautiful it was, how much of an impact that it had, how they sent it to their mother or their daughter or their grandmother. That was actually one of the coolest things, was seeing how transgenerational it was, how people were sending it to their friends, their lovers, all of it. And the best was when people started sending me tattoos. They got words tattooed from the poem on them. That was really dope. I really love that. And maybe I should get a tattoo of that, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Maybe I get to incorporate that into my next tattoo. And a good number of the messages that I started to receive were messages from people who needed help. People who were seeing this poem about self-love, and they were saying to me, I'm suicidal. I'm thinking about killing myself. I don't know what to do. Please help me love myself. So many messages from people saying, my husband just left me for another woman. I don't know what to do. So many teenagers saying, I hate my life. So many people asking me, how can I love myself more? And I didn't have an answer. I legitimately didn't know what to tell these people. And I felt as if I was a massive fraud. Suddenly, I had all these new followers. Suddenly, I was being invited to speak places. But I didn't have an answer for the 15-year-old kid who was in an abusive household and didn't love themselves. And I didn't know what to say. And I got really sick. In the first 5 days after the poem went viral, I really never get sick. I dropped into a deep illness, like a fever, but I also couldn't have any light on. So I had to stay in my room with no light coming in, and was shivering and shaking and just going through a whole process. If you don't know this by now, I have a lot of deep spiritual esoteric beliefs. I know I don't wear it on my sleeve the way that some people do, but deep practice in plant medicines and meditation and various things. And so I'm going to speak to my energetic esoteric beliefs around this, which is, if you've ever had that experience of thinking of someone, and the moment you're thinking of them, they send you a text message or call you, or you just have that feeling when you're out somewhere that someone's looking at you, and you look over and you catch their eyes, and you just felt that. It speaks to this extra sensory perception that we have of being aware when attention is on us in some way, shape, or form. And so you could imagine what that might feel like to have 40 million people in 48 hours suddenly become aware of you, suddenly become cognizant to put their attention on you, to have thousands of people who have now messaged you and tried to create connection to you. The level of hooks energetically that entered my system and my auric field at that time were massive. And my body couldn't handle it. And it went into breakdown. And it literally needed to shut down and not even let in light, because light is just information, right? Frequencies. So it was like, stop. You cannot take in anything else. And since then, I've learned how to take care of my auric field and my energy bodies, and I sage myself or Palo Santo myself and cleanse myself every single night before bed, and all of these things, how to put shields up when I'm in public environments. I had to learn that. But at the time, I didn't know it. And so I got physically ill for about 5 days in a really intense way while this poem was going viral. And then came out of it to all these messages where I felt as if I was a fraud. And I dropped into one of the deepest depressions I've ever been in my life. There's so many directions I can go with this. I was going through a breakup. There were a lot of stresses in my life at that time. It's kind of a perfect storm. But at the root of it, I couldn't get myself out for months and months and months. And what would ultimately be probably at least a year that I'd say that I was in this deep depression. And, it's interesting when talking about this, because I don't know if I was technically suicidal, because I wasn't ever contemplating how I would kill myself. But I was having really dark visions. I remember when I was in an Airbnb one time and I was looking up at the ceiling that had these wood beams, and I had just a flash, like a movie, like a flash of me hanging from one of the beams. And another moment while I was in the shower where I was just kind of zoning out. And then I looked down and all of the water was running red off my body as if I had cut myself. And so I just had these moments of really intense darkness. And I was scared. And I tried everything. I mean, I went down into the jungles of Peru and sat dieta with plant medicine and like deep Amazon jungle shamans. And I went out to Bali and I started to do physical detoxing, because so much mental health has to do with our gut. And so when I figured that out, it was time for me to heal my gut and start to detox from heavy metals and parasites and get my blood sugar right. One of the things that I didn't know as I was doing these cleanses was that my blood sugar was so dysregulated, because every morning, as an example, I was having a smoothie first thing in the morning and spiking everything. And then I would crash by the afternoon and I'd want to jump off a bridge. They were like suicidal smoothies, and I didn't even know that I was doing it. I thought I was eating healthy with the smoothie. So really learning how to do that and go through these cleanses and special diets. And then I started working with 2 different therapists and doing a bunch of colonics, because I had this belief that also while I was doing these cleanses, like the shit literally in me is old and outdated and I need it to go. It's carrying consciousness that I want out of my body. And I lost a ton of weight. And I started working with a therapist where I started to realize that there was it was time for me to address at a deeper level the PTSD in my body from a repressed memory of childhood sexual abuse. I was molested when I was 5, and that was something that I didn't remember until I was 30. And I had done some work on it, but now it was at a way deeper level. And what that actually looked like, to give you an idea, guys, is in our first couple sessions, my therapist asked if she could just put her foot on top of my foot while we talked. Could she sit close enough to put her foot on top of my foot when we talked? And it was funny because I was like, yeah, sure. And then she puts her foot on top of my foot while we're talking. And about 2 minutes into that experience, suddenly I feel my body start to contract. Suddenly it feels really unsafe because now this person was touching me and I didn't want it anymore after 2 minutes. It's been long enough. And the feeling of being touched when I don't want it was triggering this PTSD in my body and going into dissociative tendencies. And I mean, you can feel the emotion of just this journey that I was on. And even after all of the things that I just talked about, there hit a point when I left Bali and I started to travel, and I was, my relationship had ended and I was on my own, and I was literally traveling by myself for the first time in a year, because prior to that, I'd been making a reality show called The Art of Choosing Love, which I put out for free on YouTube. And it was this show of what it looked like to heal from a breakup after 10 years with someone and travel the world and do all these things. And I made this show, and I had fallen in love while making the show, got into another relationship for a year, and then that relationship ended. And suddenly I was by myself, going through all of the things that I just shared with you. And I returned to the poem. This is the Creative Path podcast. And this is, for me, something that's so important to make sure you understand, which is that our creativity is where our higher selves can place messages for us that we won't even get until later on down the road. Our creativity is the place where our highest self can show us a reflection of what's actually needed. It's not just the place where we put what we know. It's the place where we can be surprised. It's the place where we dance with the creative muse, and we get to access parts of our consciousness or collective consciousness that is not normally where we're operating. It's not normally what we're accessing. But when we step into a bubble of creativity and we walk the creative path, suddenly we open up to that possibility. And so I returned to this poem, and I felt in this moment, I think I was in Vermont at the time, and I remember I was doing naked mirror work. I was standing naked in front of a mirror and saying nice things to myself. And I remember thinking, why don't you love yourself? Why don't you love yourself? How can I love myself? And asking this same question that so many people had asked me and had triggered this deep depression by feeling like a fraud. And I thought to myself, my truth is that I believe it all comes back to self-love. That's what I believe. At the very core, underneath all of our depression, underneath all of the anger, underneath all of it, I believe is an invitation to love ourselves more as the starting point. And I didn't know what that actually looked like, but I did believe that to be true. And so I thought, if that's true, then what I'm going to do is start taking more actions of self-love every single day. And there was a part of me that still felt like a fraud. And so I made a commitment to myself that I would not engage with the outside world until I shifted my energetic state each morning. On these mornings where I woke up feeling incredibly depressed and toxic, I would do the things that I felt were self-loving until I felt a shift. And only then would I turn my phone back on and engage with anyone else in my life. And what that looked like was, on some days, it looked like 4 hours of different practices and exercises. And those things looked like crying, journaling, shaking my body, dancing, writing poetry, taking baths, saunas, cold plunges, working out, breath work, Sometimes it looked like just sitting in the discomfort. I remember a moment where I was sitting on the couch and I felt so uncomfortable, as if my skin was crawling. I was so just did not want to be alive in that moment. And I sat on the couch and I closed my eyes and I put my hands on my legs and I just sat there and I felt it. And I felt the part of me that started to want to get on social media. And I said, no, sit in this. And I felt the part of me that could literally visually see all the snacks that I had in the cupboard and the fridge and wanted to go eat. And I said, no, sit in this. And I sat in it like 20 something minutes until I felt as if I was no longer trying to run from it. And then I asked myself, what do you want to do now? And what I wanted to do was dance. And so I turned on music and I started dancing by myself in this living room in an Airbnb in Santa Monica. I remember it clearly. And I did this for months. I just did self-love practices for months. I listened to what I needed for months, over and over and over again. And what I realized from that experience was a depth of wisdom around self-love that I now teach, that I now embody, and now have as an answer for anyone who reaches out to me and says, how do I love myself more? Which is that self-love is the byproduct of the relationship you have with yourself. Where people get confused and hung up and stuck is thinking that self-love is something you either have or you don't. Like it's a light switch that you turn on or off. And so when people say, I don't love myself, I say, that's not true. You do love yourself. You just want to love yourself more. There's more love you can give yourself, and you feel that and you want that. And it's the byproduct of the relationship we have with ourselves. So what does that mean? I often look at this through the 5 love languages. If you're not familiar, go to, I believe it's 5lovelanguages.com. You can take a free test to learn about what are the languages in which you give and receive love. There are 5 of them: gifts, quality time, words of affirmation, acts of service, and physical touch. And so the people that you love the most, the people that you have the deepest relationships with, you're going to have a deeper level of some of those love languages being exchanged between the two of you and with consistency over time. And when we have self-love, what we're talking about is what is our relationship with ourselves? How much of those 5 love languages are we giving and therefore receiving with ourselves? Quality time, as an example. So many people confuse being alone as quality time. That's not the same thing. Just like you can be out to dinner with a friend of yours or your lover, and you're both sitting at the dinner table on your phones, scrolling Instagram. You know how that we see that so often now at restaurants. That's not quality time. You're not actually creating connection with each other. You're not getting to know each other more deeply. Even though you're spending time together, it's not quality time. Similarly, if you're the person that every time you're alone, you need to turn on the TV or get on your social media or whatever, that's not quality time. Are you getting to know yourself? Are you listening to what you truly need? Are you developing a deeper relationship with yourself? What about physical touch? When's the last time you actually stretched your body or loved your body? Outside of with so many guys nowadays that are doing the whole pornography masturbation thing, which is depleting the dopamine response and also creating this just get it over with idea instead of actually having a self-love practice where it doesn't even have to get sexual, but just I'm going to love up on my body. And when you start to do these things, you start to develop a deeper relationship to your body. You improve the communication you have with yourself. You start to listen to yourself more deeply. You improve the relationship you have with yourself, and therefore you begin to love yourself more. You learn how to love yourself more. And so the irony of having the most viral poem in history that is based in self-love, kicking me into a journey of depression so that I had to learn how to actually love myself. The irony of that, the beauty of that is not lost on me. And I'm so grateful because I now have an answer. I have an answer for others and I have an answer for myself. So I know I will never drop into depression again. I have no worries at all about dropping into depression again, which used to be one of my biggest fears, was that I would fall back into a suicidal depression. And it was so hard to get out of it the first time that I would never be able to get out of it again. I didn't have it in me. That was a huge fear. But because I understand self-love so much more deeply, I don't fear that anymore. If I feel depression creeping in, I go, oh, there's something out of alignment. It's time for me to shift something in my life. It's time for me to get back into connection with myself. That's the journey that I've been on with this poem. That's the creative path I've taken with "You Are Who You've Been Looking For," which to me culminates in my favorite line, the line that more than anything else I think encompasses exactly what this whole thing is about, which is treat yourself like someone you love. I hope that this encourages you to do that. If it's resonated with you, please share it out with someone who might need to hear this. I appreciate you so much and want to remind you that always, in all ways, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you taking the time. If you are interested in building a life that you love through the 3 pillars of relationship, business, and creativity, then I encourage you to continue checking out more of my content, including this video, which I really think that you will like.